Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Better SMB podcast hosted by David Altena and me, Rob Bull. We're here to help small and medium-sized businesses like yours achieve more. Whether you're looking for practical tips, inspiring stories or expert advice, we have got you covered. Join us as we dive into the world of business, sharing insights and strategies to help you grow and succeed. Now, before we get into the podcast proper, I have been told again to remind you, the listeners, to hit the like button, follow, do all the things you should be doing to support this podcast and the work David and I are doing. So go ahead, do it now, quick. Anyway, this episode, we talk about Trump, the US elections, and all of those tariffs that all the media and some politicians are saying is going to produce doom and gloom to the New Zealand business economy. Well, we're taking a different tack on this one. We think it is a great opportunity to innovate, to think differently, and to make this the kick up the arse that we, the business community, should really take. So it's really interesting episode. David and I have a rant about a whole lot of things all related to that. It is a little bit of a shorter one, so great for your commute to work. Anyway, that's enough from me. Let's get started. On with the podcast.
Welcome back to the Better SMB. I'm David Altena.
And I'm Rob Bull.
In our last episode, it was my turn for a bit of a rant. That was back or released on November the 3rd. Since then, on November the 5th, we've had the United States go to the election polls. And, it was my turn for a bit of a rant last time. And today is Rob's turn. I've given a bit of a hint as to what your rant might be about. So, Rob, how about I hand over to you to kick us off?
Yeah, no, thanks, Dave. I guess it was the reflection and the reaction response of all the media, the week after the US elections, and now, Trump's president-elect, and that is putting some scaremongering amongst the business community in New Zealand. And mostly because of Trump's, whether or not it's true or false, but it could be the best wake-up call that we've ever had, which is the whole story around increased tariffs, particularly certainly for our exporters, our manufacturing, our primary, and all the businesses that feed directly into those industries. It was certainly in the media a bit of henny penny in the sky falling on our heads and going, oh my gosh, we're expensive already, and now with these potentially 20% increase in tariffs, we're just going to get priced out of the market. And that's at the superficial level. And my rant is really more of, my gosh, we can either see this as a negative and just go, woe me, poor us down at the bottom of the world, and we're going to struggle even more, and all the other countries will just get richer. Or we can actually take this as a slap in the face that we've actually needed around productivity, because it really, and this is my simple maths, and I'm happy for people to send in comments, hit me up on LinkedIn if I'm really out of whack. But the back of the envelope maths really is, if we're still in the lower quarter of the OECD productivity range, and we lift out our productivity by 20 to 30%, which should just bring us up to average, and I underline that, it should bring up, work our way up over the next 2 to 5 years up to the average OECD productivity range. That will nullify any increase in tariffs. Now, before everyone goes, oh, it's not going to be on food, it's not going to be on this, it doesn't matter. It should be our goal, the fact that if we can lift up our efficiency, make the same products, materials, services even, 20% more efficient, that will nullify any tariffs. And if they aren't implemented at the full 20% and they're only 10% or none, well, then we're even better off. And certainly the other countries that we export to will be even better off there as well. So my rant really is about, let's not see this as a negative. This is the best opportunity that we've had in a long, long time to actually go, no, we're serious about this. We can work to this goal. And as a country, as a whole range of industries, we should be seeing it as a motivator rather than as a doom and gloom and negative. That's my rant. I don't know. What do you think, David?
Well, they say innovation happens under constraints, and I guess having someone effectively increase the price of our goods by 20%, that is going to cause us a bit of a constraint. So I got my calculator out and visited a few places, and I see New Zealand's GDP somewhere around 250 billion. I think that's US dollars, and our top 5 trading partners account for 64% of that. And our top 5 trading partners are China, Australia, the US, the EU, and then Japan. So if we look at this, China 28%, Australia around about 13%, United States 11.5%, somewhere in that. So you could argue 20% increase, just over 10% of our exports. It's probably not that bad, but I think you've touched on something really, really quite interesting. This is a great opportunity, like you've said, to get more effective at what we're doing, start building efficiencies, start innovating, and recognize those benefits on the rest of our exports as well. Because if we can do that, we would increase our productivity across that range of trading partners dramatically.
Yep. And so lifting, that 250 billion GDP, lifting at 20%, it's 300 billion, right? But let's tap that back, because what we're talking about is 64% of our top 5 trading partners create that. So, even if it's 280 billion, and as much as I hate the word growth, because I think it's a tangent and it often detracts from good business, because if we're growing and we're making too much money and all that, we get lazy in the systems anyway, and there's often too much fat with how we work. And I think you used the word constraints, which is really, really cool. If we're just really focusing on that and set that goal, we're going to have that growth. We're going to get that new money. The recession will be well and truly past. We just need to set a focus. We need across the board support, certainly at a government level, more so at an industry level. All the industry partners like EMA, etc., all the agricultural groups, Fonterra, all of those kind of things need to really get on board with this.
So something I like is the US are kind of sticking a stake in the ground, and they're going, you know what? We've had it with everyone else selling us stuff, taking industry offshore, and they're wanting to bring back some control into their world. So they're wanting to take control in it. Regardless of the politics and the personalities and all that sort of thing, you have to admire that. And it'd be great for us to do something similar.
Well, absolutely. And, I was surprised Trump didn't get into the last election, because if you look at all the reports, certainly local and reports to the US, he was onboarding like thousands of jobs a month in the US last time he was in presidency, because he pissed off China. And he said, we're not going to work with you. We're not going to import. We're going to actually make that back and, bring it back to America and onshore all those jobs and roles and all of that. So we know he's done it, but it's not a bad thing. And I think this is coming off the back of, we had one of those swanky lunches. Andrew Bailey was talking. He's the Minister of the SME, small business, and he was on stage talking about that we must support directly the exporters so we earn more money. Unfortunately, 3 days later, there was a lot of funding from Callaghan that helps with this lifting in capacity and capability. Now that was cut about 3 days after that, so I don't know how he's thinking of supporting SMEs and exporters, but there needs to be a real big focus.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, the desire to cut costs, and much like if you need to cut costs, you kind of take that approach where it's a little bit haphazard if you're doing it at home. Right, we're going to kill Netflix, no more going out, something else, not going to drive the car as much, and I'm going to drop to third-party insurance. And it's this just random selection of things that you can affect in the short term, but ultimately don't deliver you a benefit in the long term. And that is kind of what this feels like. You had a post out talking around that, and I think you actually tagged in Minister Bailey, and I was trying to draft a reply to that, and I wanted to say, something like it just feels like a scattergun approach. There's no strategy behind what they're doing. It's just really piecemeal and just shooting from the hip.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit of shooting from the hip. They can certainly the politicians can articulate and justify the rationale behind it, and it's really sound when you're listening to it in person live. But then it's looking at the behaviours around, and actions speak louder than words, and all of that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, I think they've thrown the baby out with the bathwater on this one. But I say that with an asterisk. I'm absolutely passionate that this is not it's not an issue where industries and businesses should sit there with cap out and going, please, sir, may I have more. We should not be reliant on government always taking the initiative and incentivizing this. This is really earning your meal. If you're not going to take the approach and work smarter around your business and look at how you can manufacture or build or produce all of those things more efficiently, you'll be out of a job. You will not have a business, particularly if the US is a large chunk of your export focus. So I don't think industry bodies should be waiting for government handouts. It should be self-initiating, because any investment is going to pay off. So if you can remain competitive in your industry, particularly with this whole factor of the push around increased tariffs into the US, then the payoff is you're going to be more cost effective to export up to China, UK, all of the other major exporting bodies. So we should be taking the initiative and not waiting for that silver bullet and handout.
So if we think about this, 20%, it sounds huge. I mean, if you want to get a 20% increase or save 20%, it's like doing the same amount of work you do in 5 days in 4.
Yep.
That seems quite large, but then remember, this 20% only applies to a small percentage of our exports. So starting this journey will actually benefit a business quite quickly, because you can make those minor incremental changes that are going to produce 1% here, 1% there. Because let's face it, 20% on 10% is around about 2%. If you can get a 1% benefit across 100% of your products that you sell, you're halfway there.
Yep.
And 1% feels like it's incremental gain, not wholesale change. What do you think?
Yeah, most businesses you can split up across the end-to-end process of creating orders, processing those orders, building, manufacturing staff, exporting, and finishing off. So most businesses you can probably break down into a cycle of about 5 to 7 stages, always, right? Now, if you improve one of those stages by 5% each month, over 12 months, that's 12% improvement. So you could go through each stage. So even if you've got 6, let's make the maths easy. If you've got 6 stages in your business, phase life cycle, and you improve 1% in each of those phases every month, in 1 year, you've got a 2% increase across all of those phases. Boom, done, easy. And it's not hard. I know you're playing around with all the smart technology in businesses and automation and all of that kind of stuff, the Siri assessments, and looking at how we can utilize technology to take away the laborious and repetitive tasks for humans, because that leads, for me, the lean and using our people smarter, right? How can we just automate any orders and it goes straight to the production line? And faffing around for an hour, a month or so, it could be done quite straightforward if you're ready to invest in a few $1,000s to get that done. Now, yes, it is an expense, but also, your banking will loan you some of that money, but that means that you're going to get competitive in that space. Hey, you do an order, it's going to be straight into our production line, and we're going to get our production a lot smarter as well. Those are the kind of things that we need to be self-investing, not just waiting for Minister Bailey to get out of this little war chest and throw some dollars at this. Certainly it will help. Whether or not it's tax incentives or however that works, don't care. But it's not that difficult. All we are going to, what I feel we're going to do is, I'll give you the map. You've seen the map, the world map. Ireland finishes work at 5 p.m. We finish at 3 a.m. All I fear is to get the products out and then produce a lot more, to try and make as much money as we have been with all of this stuff. That 3 a.m. is going to be 5 a.m. In fact, we're probably never going to be able to sleep. So how can we get from 3 a.m. to midnight?
So we've talked about, people effectively waiting for the government money. But I know, and there's organisations that are actually taking steps. They're not waiting for our saviour who lives in Wellington to come and rescue all of us. I'm working with organisations specifically in the generative AI space who are looking at things across their business, and they're identifying ways that emerging technology can start benefiting them. I've got one client, they are a project management organisation. They can spend an hour in a meeting. It might take them 2 to 4 hours to actually go through and assign the different tasks that have come out of that meeting. And they've invested in generative AI and are building workflows that are going to make those tasks significantly easier for them. So they'll get something that's almost there, and instead of it taking 2 hours, it'll take 10 minutes. And then they can spend 20 minutes going over it. They can send it out. They've saved themselves about an hour, something like that. Probably not good maths on those numbers. Now, the interesting thing is they're not waiting for a government handout to do that. They recognise that this tech's out there. We work in a global marketplace, and they're doing it. Now, this is the services industry, and we're talking about, primary industry, manufacturing, and that sort of thing. But what are you seeing? Are you seeing those kind of early indicators that organisations are wanting to invest, or what is it out there?
Absolutely, and I think this is the benefit of funding some of that stuff, like the Siri, the smart industry assessments. happening. I see it on LinkedIn, some of my current and even old clients, going through that process. So it is becoming more and more, common to see teams just reflecting on it and seeing what they can do. There are other companies that, you and I know that are going through a lot of the local government agencies. And I even reflect on, I do my lean leadership online course, and at the moment, current cohort's got a bunch of members from the regional councils around New Zealand, and even one in Australia, which is pretty cool. And after 2 sessions on this lean leadership course, one of the feedback, I always give them challenges. How can you use information we've just talked about over the last couple of hours and implement over the next week? One of those members in a local council in New Zealand was looking at their OIA process, and the fact that they stopped for 2 or 3 hours, talked to the people in that process to understand who needs what and when, they were able to actually remove someone right out of that process because they identified it as complete waste. And everyone acknowledged that, and so they've removed 2 or 3 steps out of that process. So it doesn't even need to be, digitalized. The process will be, as a fact, once I've improved it, but it's just doing that sort of what I call the analog process to human. Go and talk to people. Let's not continue working the way we always have worked. So I'm definitely seeing larger organizations go down that smart industry technology route, and that's cool. I'm seeing local governments taking on some of that initiative. That's cool. One of my other fears around this is that top 5 to 10% of direct exporters will move so far away from the rest of our SMEs market that it will be near on impossible. This is that next tier of businesses. So if I'm an engineering firm and I make a product that I ship to another company in New Zealand and they put it all together and export that bigger product, I will get left behind if I'm that feeder business, and I'm actually seeing that right now. Because that bigger business has got the turnover to invest in all of that technology, and we're struggling that next tier that directly feed into those exporters just fall behind, and that's not going to help either. So we do need to look at this from that whole ecosystem, even if it's if direct exporters are your sort of level A, we need the level B, the direct feeders into those exporters, and whether or not that's service based or building products and making those widgets to go into the bigger piece of machinery. But yeah, teams are doing that. That's a long way. There's a long answer to your question, but teams are doing that. Businesses and organizations are doing that, but not enough.
So if we think about the tariffs that might happen with Trump, it seems to change every sentence he talks about pretty much, right?
Absolutely.
Let's just say they come on. We've got a little bit of lead time for businesses before he's going to get in, and then there's going to be probably a week before he actually starts signing things off and making things happen. So we're probably somewhere January, February. So if we look at what a business could start doing now around innovation or thinking about pivoting their business model to see how they can get ahead or find some options, what would you be doing if you were sitting in one of these businesses, either the feeder organization or you're sitting in a manufacturer, a primary industry organization that's exporting goods to the US?
Okay, this is going to come with a heavy asterisk of being a provider in a lot of some of these services, but I will be getting the equivalent, I guess, of personal trainer. If you go into the gym, you get a personal trainer if you want to really create discipline around the gains and your goal, your fitness goals and why you want to go to a gym. Otherwise, if you just go to the gym and just sort of do what you've always done, you're going to stay fit and all that. If I was any of these businesses, I'd get 2 or 3 experts around, and most of the experts play in their own swim lanes but work well together. Like if you and I went into a business, I would look at just mapping out every process and really questioning out what could be done differently, what could be automated, what actually just doesn't need to happen, or where are all the issues, the bottlenecks and all of that. And I would go through and getting a baseline of all of that information and then start prioritizing and ticking off, and just actually, even if it means employing an extra person to work solely on creating those improvements alongside the rest of the staff, so be it. Or you bring in someone like myself that will coach you through that, so you build up that internal capability. But you can make significant changes over 6 months. The double whammy around here in New Zealand is, this has been recorded in the middle of November. We are now in that zone of, we'll start that next year. And we know that that's next year isn't January the 7th or whatever the first full week of work is after all the New Year's and all of that kind of stuff. It's February. And if you're lucky, it's mid-February, if not end of, so we're talking March. So any delay now, if you can get a lot of assessment, a lot of reviews, a lot of the prep work done between now and when Santa comes, right? Yes, it will be daunting and overwhelming, but at least you'll have a to-do list that you can hit the ground running once we've had our summer break and holidays and all of that kind of stuff, and prioritize them and get into them. Now, 75%, if we take the bit of an improvement triangle, 75% of any of those improvements that will make significant change, if you put them all together, shouldn't cost too much money. It's that 25 and 5. So if we segment it, or 20, 75, 20 and 5. 5% is buying those new machines and all of that kind of stuff. That 20% in the middle will be employing people like yourself to look at how AI, how automation can really help. But you're still needing to look at that big solid base of improvements. There are plenty of people out there, and more than willing to help, whether or not it's full-time, part-time, on a consulting basis. If I was really serious and I was part of that ecosystem of exporting, I would be getting my wheels on now to at least get that baseline review done.
And that's, like, you talk about an important thing there. I recently went to a workshop with manufacturers wanting to learn about what's possible with, Industry 4 and all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And what I was really amazed at was, great people in the room create really great products. But for some of them, they were still walking bits of paper around from the office down to the factory floor to get an order, to then bring something back up to get it signed off or something like that, right? But something they all knew was they knew how things transitioned through their business, but I think they knew it. They didn't necessarily have it down on paper, and they weren't thinking about it like you're pointing out.
Yeah.
So, but that in itself is a great place to be, because they haven't invested in anything necessarily yet. They can map out what they're doing, and then they can look at, engage someone like yourself to establish the best way that they can do that. By bringing in external knowledge, you're also bringing in knowledge about other businesses that you're also working with. So someone who's a consultant, they're almost a force multiplier, and that's what you're paying them for, is to have this broader industry view, to come in and actually get a plan in place so that you can start progressing, so that you can take advantage of some of the government funded programs that may still exist for a little bit longer. The smart industry assessment that Callaghan are still funding at the moment. Now, you need to have under 150 staff, which is probably a lot of people who listen to this. But there's some prerequisites, and those prerequisites center around knowing what your processes are.
Yep.
And if you know what those are, then that makes it a lot easier to fine tune them and then start turbocharging them with technology. And it also means that you're not using a crap process, as you'd say, to churn out crap products faster. You've actually got a good process, and you can start doing that. And then as you get those benefits, and those benefits can be significant. I was talking to a gentleman who implements manufacturing execution systems, and one of the things he talks to businesses about is he can deliver $400,000 of additional profit to a business that implements that type of system within the first 12 months. Now, I imagine there's a few disclaimers around that, but that doesn't seem so bad to me.
No, and I think just going back onto your comment is, one of the baseline requirements is knowing what your processes are. I would probably flesh that out and say knowing that your processes are efficient and up to date, right?
Yep.
Because I'm going to a client in Hawke's Bay in the coming week, and they know what their processes are, but they also know how shite they are. At least I've got a plan in place of identifying where all the processes and where all the issues are in the business, and they're taking actions every week. They're working their absolute butts off because they've got to do this. They've got to fix the plane while it's still flying. Definitely have a plan, review, test, externally advise all of those things around your processes. Once you've got it in a stable place, then you can get those automations in place, and yourself, and there's a lot of other people that can help with that. Definitely, I think between the 6 weeks between now and Christmas for New Zealand and that Christmas break, you can create a strong plan and actually start that momentum very, very soon, very quickly.
Yep, and remember, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail.
No, I think if you fail to plan, or you don't respond and you don't use this to motivate yourselves, your board, your investors, and if you've got a good plan, then your funders, your banks will get them behind you. And if you can actually start telling that story, and I think you've talked about this in the past, particularly around business plans and all of that kind of stuff, if you can create and tell that story, then the investment will come. And that's scary. I get it, right? I get it. It's really scary. But, hey, the interest rates are falling, so that's even more possible. But if you loan 20, 30,000 to get a big chunk of that work done, that's you're going to turn that into 300,000. Right? So if you're turning over 3 million and you're lifting up 10% of your efficiency, that's 300,000. So all of that kind of stuff. I know the maths is a little bit ropey, but it's relatively in the ballpark.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, let's wrap it up there. And really, the key takeaway we want people to have from this is, the risk of the changes in the US and what that could mean for a segment of your customer base and their desire to potentially keep ordering from you. Use that risk as an opportunity to start taking action. It's a great thing. If you start taking action, if you start planning on how you can start changing your business to become more effective, that's ultimately going to lead you to more productivity. It's going to mean you're going to be more profitable. And if you can be more profitable in one market, you can carry that profitability over to other markets. And if they don't have tariffs, then all of a sudden you're making some really, really good profits. And that can subsidize your efforts into some of the higher cost markets. But make sure you're taking the steps to get a plan in place. Start thinking about how you can innovate in your business. If you're heading into a quiet time with the Christmas and New Year period, use that as an opportunity to start thinking. Don't just take a holiday, come back next year and go, time to start again. Have a look into the opportunities that exist in the Callaghan funding side of things. There's smart industry assessments that you can take advantage of potentially. because challenges like this lead to innovation. Innovation leads to growth, not just business growth, but personal growth. And if you approach that strategically, then that can give you an amazing competitive advantage for your business, not just now, but heading into the future. So thanks for listening to this episode of The Better SMB. We'll catch you next time.
Hey there, it's Rob here again. Thanks for tuning into the Better SMB podcast. If you have made it this far, we're going to assume that you have enjoyed the discussion and keen for more. If there is a particular topic you want us to cover or someone that you think we should be inviting onto the show, please let us know in the comments or message us directly on LinkedIn. Our aim is to make this podcast as relevant as possible to all SMB owners in New Zealand and of course the world. Anyway, before I go, a quick reminder for you to follow or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss another episode. Until next time, stay efficient, keep optimizing, keep getting better.